Good morning, dolls, and welcome to Little Gretchen's workshop. So remember I asked you what you thought I was going to make that tacky glue bottle into? It definitely is a hot water tank. Many of you guessed it absolutely correctly. But after I got to my work table and began to work, I looked at the diameter of the bottle and it seemed a little large, a little bit off scale, and it was taking up a lot of room in the corner of my laundry room. So I opted for a couple medicine bottles. So I peeled the labels off, cleaned them up really good, and I had a couple other components that I thought might work really well. That was a disposable communion cup. I had a couple of those that I saved because I thought they were a really nice shape. So I decided to add two medicine bottles together, and I found this really nice bottle closure that my friend from the Ann Arbor miniature show gave me as well. And I thought that would work nice for the top. So I looked at the communion cup and thought that would be nice for the base or the pedestal to put the water tank on. Now, dolls, I should give you a little disclaimer. This is not a modern hot water tank. This is actually an old-fashioned Victorian type water tank. Here are my inspirations. So I found a couple pictures online and I thought they were kind of interesting. So I opted for the more vintage looking style. Many of them were made out of cast iron and copper and things like that. And some of them look pretty ornate. So I thought this would be a fun project for the rooming house dollhouse laundry room. Just a really weird blend of ornate and industrial. And some people may say, but the washing machine is more modern and the sink is more modern. And I do understand that, but many times when houses are renovated, everything doesn't get replaced, especially if the house is being renovated on a budget. Some of the older things that are working and not broken, they stay. So my idea was to attach the communion cup to the bottom of the medicine bottles and to connect two medicine bottles together. I felt like since the house was so large, it needed a really big hot water tank, like floor to ceiling size. So, in order for my paint and other embellishments to stick to the surface of the slick medicine bottles, I gave it a nice thick coat of gesso. And gesso acts as like a primer for slick surfaces so that paint and things will adhere. And dolls, although I said a thick coat, I actually did two thin coats. So dolls, I had started thinking about adding some cool gadgets to the hot water tank, kind of to give it like a kind of complex or complicated look. So I thought maybe some type of meter or some type of pipes and actually it was way too many ideas coming at me all at once. So I had to kind of slow myself down. So I began to focus on some of my little random broken jewelry pieces and gadgets to see what I could come up with. So, dolls, I just want you to know that I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just laid out all the things that I thought might work and things that reminded me of what I saw in my inspiration images. So I felt like with something that was a meter type thing, there would have to be some type of clock. So I did have a clock face. So in order to attach the wire, I drilled holes in two sides of the piece of wood so that I could add some little grommets and then add the wire piece. Now, dolls, I did struggle with this portion of the project quite a bit because the wood was pretty thin, but it was really, really hard, and I had a hard time drilling a little hole. I didn't want to go very deep, just deep enough to attach the wire, so I had to use more than one drill bit to get the desired depth. So I stopped to put the clock face on because I felt like that was something that was pretty simple and I knew exactly how I wanted it to sit. So many times, if you run into a situation when you're creating something, do something that you're for sure you know that's how you want it to go, and you can go ahead and set it in place and allow it to dry while you're figuring out the more complex or difficult part. And dolls, also, I want to encourage you to be patient with yourself. When you're creating something from scratch, and you're using scraps and remnants and trash trying to create something that's believable and lovely. You have to be patient. With a kit, you have everything already decided. Everything is sized. Everything is cut perfectly. You're just doing a little sanding and assembling based on the instructions. When you're working from scratch, you have to figure out all the details. You have to do all the calculations and measurements if you measure. But give yourself some time and give yourself some grace when you're trying to create from scratch, especially if you're making something you've never made before. So after I got the clock face on and started to add the grommets, I thought it was really starting to look really metery. So I was excited about that. So then I was encouraged to keep going. And so I kept looking for pieces that may look like gadgets and gears and things that may be connected or associated with a meter. Now, dolls, I've never seen a Victorian hot water heater in person, so I'm strictly going by my imagination and the inspiration pictures. This is definitely not going to be mechanically or historically correct, but it is going to be cute. So I set my little meter aside and began to paint the surface of the actual hot water tank. Now, I imagined in my mind that it would be cast iron, so I painted everything except the very top with black acrylic paint. So while that was drying, I decided I would go ahead and start painting the top. So in order to keep everything looking really metallic, I use my Tester's model paint. It's kind of like a bronze, like gold color, and I thought it looked really interesting. I really like that it's giving a metallic finish to this plastic lid. It's starting to not look so much like a medicine top and actually more like some type of mechanical component. It's really amazing what a little paint will do. So now back to my little meter. So now that the grommets are solid and dry, I'm trying to fit in the little copper piece of wire that I had. And I realized the little piece of wire wasn't quite as pliable as I thought it was. It really resisted me bending it in this process. And dolls, I'm laughing because I have no idea where I got this little piece of wire because I collect all kinds of scraps and things all the time. But this wire was really, really rigid and it didn't want to bend. And dolls, I do have a lot of other wires, but I really wanted to use this one because it looked really realistic and copper. And just so you know, this is definitely edited video because I can't even tell you how long I struggled with that wire to attach it, but I finally got it in the position that I wanted it. And again, I thought it turned out really cute. So now I just wanted to add a few more components to the little meter to just give it a little bit more realism. And you know, dolls, I'm just really, really big on details because all these little details are what bring a miniature scene to life. So I started to play with all those little bits and pieces that I had pulled out earlier to try to see what would look best. Again, dolls, this is not a kit. This is being made from scratch. So I'm sitting things here and there to see the effect, to see how they look, to see how much more realism they add. And I found a little button piece and then a small gear and decided that would look kind of cute together. So I took the little button part and put it on first, and then I added the little gear piece to the top to give it kind of the look of some type of control mechanism. The meter still looked a little plain to me, so I felt like it needed something else. So I had a couple springs and a couple screws and a couple other things laying around, just trying to see what would help it. And then I decided to use a couple of my silver toned nail art studs and put it in the corners to give it the look of some type of rivet. Now, dolls, I painted two little small thin pieces of card and kind of bent them in a rounded shape because I want them to be doors on the outside of the hot water tank. Now again, more nail art. I peeled off a couple decals. They're the perfect size and look like some type of Victorian emblem. Dolls, nail art really comes in handy for miniatures. Now, dolls, in this instance, I just centered them and placed them right on the surface of my painted doors. I actually didn't add any additional glue because they do already have adhesive on them, but definitely feel free to add whatever type of clear adhesive that you like to use. And right there, dolls, you can see my little doors are simply some little pieces of card that are painted bronze. Now, dolls, after I finished adding the decal emblem to both of the little doors, I really liked the way they look. I really did. I just felt like they look a little plain. They needed a little bit more detail. So I had to think about what I was going to do to enhance them. So one is a bottom door and one is a top door. So their shape is a little bit different. So I went on and opened up more nail art, dolls. And I thought about adding some gold nail studs around the little bronze doors as rivets. I thought that would make them look even more vintage or Victorian. So I used a very similar concept that I used with the little meter, just adding the little gold studs to the corners of the doors, again, to look like little rivets. And I really liked it. It was kind of simple. I actually was thinking of making them more ornate, but at this point, I hadn't decided to go any further, so I stopped with the studs just in the corners. Now, what I did know for sure is that these doors needed handles, so I cut a jump ring in half and added a little glob of my Gorilla Gel Super Glue. Now, dolls, with something little like this, you definitely have to put an amount that's generous enough to give the little half of jump ring something to hold on to. Now, the jump ring is a silver color. I may actually paint it, but I did kind of want a little contrast. But I set the little half of jump ring in the glob, and I did the same thing to the second door. Now, dolls, in an instance like this, although it looks set, it's not set. So leave it so it can dry and move on to something else. So I went back to the actual tower. And although I painted the base the solid black color, I decided I wanted it to be bronze as well. So I went ahead and put a single coat of my bronze testers on that base piece. And I really feel like it's bringing the piece to life, just that little change. So while the base was drying, I started to think about hinges. And I actually have one hinge that's left over from a Correspondence kit I had. So while I was trying to decide what to do, I went ahead to try to place my doors on my actual tower. Now that the handles are dry and the grommets are dry, I just was dry fitting where I was going to place the actual doors. So after I had an idea where I was going to place them, I went back to playing with that hinge. I really liked the hinge, and I made a little hinge, but I didn't like the one I made. It didn't match. So since I couldn't decide on the hinges, I went on with the placement of the doors. So I glued my doors on with fabric fusion. So I placed one door right at the bottom near the base, and then the smaller one up a little bit higher. And I thought that looked good, and it resembled some of the images that I had seen online. And although I used the fabric fix or fabric fusion to glue it to the outside of the hot water tank, I did have to hold it. When you're trying to adhere things to a surface that's not flat, it's a little bit more of a challenge regardless to what type of adhesive you use. And again, dolls, I have some oozing around the top of the doors, but no worries on that because I'm actually going to distress and age this and make it look as though it has soot and dirt and things on it. I'm not going to do it in this video, but that will account for some of the globs of glue around the doors. So dolls, I have this tiny piece of chain that was in a little bag of scraps left over from a Correspondence kit. And I thought it would be perfect as a pull chain or chain pull for the hot water tank. Now I'm not sure what they would be pulling a chain for, but I just thought it would be a nice detail. I did get a suggestion that I should have used it on the wash tub sink to be connected to the drain stopper. I think that's a great suggestion. I do believe I'm going to use that. So I also had another little piece of pipe left over, and it had a really cool shape to it. It looked like it was made specifically for this project. Now I love that under the medicine top lid there are little spaces, and the little spaces are perfect for fitting in these components that I'm adding to the outside of the hot water tank. Now, when you have a piece like this pipe that I'm adding to the side, it had an unusual shape, so I made sure the top part was secured first, and then I began to attach the little piece that's turned toward the hot water tank. And I also want to show you, dolls, that I decided to cut the little hinge in half and use one half on one door and the other half on the other door. It worked out perfect. So sometimes, dolls, all you need is a half of a hinge, especially if you're not going to open the door. So here I am adding that little half of a hinge to the second door and just putting a little glob of my Gorilla Gel super glue. And dolls, I just used some old tweezers and placed my half of a hinge right there on the edge of my door. And so there we are, 2 doors, 1 hinge cut in half. It worked out perfect, dolls. I'm really pleased with this project. So I'm going to set it aside and work on that meter. So at first I thought that I wanted to add the meter to the actual body of the hot water tank. And I kept trying to come up with a way to fit it or place it on the outside. And it really wasn't working well because the surface of the hot water tank is rounded. And I didn't show it here, but I'd actually shaped and baked a piece of clay to cause it to fit. Then I had a new idea. The new idea came, dolls, when I began to play. Play fuels my imagination. While playing, I realized that I wanted the meter to actually be on the pipes next to the hot water heater. So I went to the rooming house laundry room and placed my hot water tank in the room, and I really liked the way it looks. And then I looked at where my pipes were positioned, and after I sat the washing machine in place and played around in there a little while, I decided I wanted it to be mounted to the wall with the pipes. And I'm really pleased with that look. Now, I do need to run that pipe behind the hot water heater, but definitely I'll do that in my finish. But I really like the way that turned out, dolls. I'm very pleased with my little meter and my Victorian hot water heater. Now, dolls, if you enjoyed this video today, definitely let me know in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe, and always look for me on Mondays and Wednesdays after 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I always enjoy creating these videos for you, dolls. Now, there will be another video where I distress these items and install them after the bead board is up. So make sure you stay tuned so you don't miss the next episode of Little Gretchen's Workshop. Bye-bye now, dolls.